Hello, YouTube. I'm just setting up making sure this mic is working. Well, this one seems to be on. And am I making sound down there? Yeah. Huh. Be very low volume though. So let me make sure it's looking at the right. I'm streaming starting now.
What's that?
I'm online.
Sorry?
This is my broadcast.
Oh, sorry.
But nobody can really hear me because it's the wrong mics being used. Let me try to figure out what's going on with that. The light's on here. And let me go and make sure they're using this. Yeti stereo microphone. Internal microphone. Back here. It's not working. Very odd. I'm having always technical difficulties. What I would pay for a sound guy or no gal. Hello, YouTube. It doesn't look like I'm making any sound. It looks like it's not detecting this mic. Hi, Lori. You can hear me. If I talk at this volume, can you hear me just fine? Because my little green line is very low looking. It looks like it's not using the right microphone. You say you can hear me, but can you give me a little bit more feedback on that? Yeah, just fine. Okay. It's just a glitch, a thing with YouTube live stream. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for coming, my first person online. And now YouTube's letting other people know I'm online. Today we just had a wonderful thing happen, which was I live in a Mexican-American neighborhood, and we're in the middle right now, in case somebody's watching this video later, of the quarantine, pseudo-quarantine, stay-at-home time. And it apparently is one of my elder neighbor's birthdays, and his family showed up in cars, a sort of a caravan of cars, like a parade, and they're honking, playing Mexican horn and contemporary music. And a woman got out and did a beautiful dance in the street with feathers, a huge feathered headdress, and a traditional thing. And it was beautiful. So it's nice when people take these hard times and make something positive out of it. Movie to follow. I did get a few minutes. So on that note, similarly, we're going to focus today on, if you title the name of your broadcast grief, it's not going to, so you're not appealing to the masses. Right now, people want to watch comedy, right? And, actually, on further thought, I always title my videos, a few days or a week before I actually, reflect. I spent a long time reflecting about what I want to share and so forth. And then as I'm reflecting, sometimes the title doesn't reflect exactly what I'm coming to on it. But I want to, so I think if I had to retitle it now, it might be Secondhand Misery. Instead of grief, exactly. Before, if you go back and look at my collection of videos, I don't remember what number it was. Julie Rogers came in and talked to us about loss and grief, and how little is said about that really in the Buddhist tradition, and how needed it is for us to deal in real ways with personal losses. But this time, we're talking about something I noticed, which was people are saying, and I noticed in myself some days, that you feel really exhausted and like you do one little thing, or maybe you work for 3 hours a day, and some of you, like you, Lori, who's online with me right now. Hey, Heart and Heart are probably worked a full day today. But for a lot of us, what I'm seeing on social media is that people are getting exhausted, like at least by the afternoon, way more so than usual. And I also hear, all these feelings of anxiety and fear. And you think, oh, that's obvious. They're scared of getting sick. And of course, that's part of it. But I think I may be biased by the number of really good-hearted people that I know, like the people that show up, watch these videos and so forth. But I think those two things are linked together, and I was trying to label that with the word grief, but, you know most of us are tuning in to the news and the counts of who's sick and who's died, um, during the day, and it kinda seeps in, and I guess if you were totally today I had a day when I was very occupied with other things, and it didn't seep in as much, so maybe the unemployed people get it more than the employed people. But by the end of the day, I think a lot of people are hurting for other people that they don't necessarily know. You hear personal stories and you hear, and you see the impersonal statistics. So it's hard to think of it as even something with it if we're there isn't somebody in our family, it's hard to think of it as something personal. But I think it's seeping in anyway, and it's empathy exhaustion. They talk about compassion fatigue, and I'm a retired nurse, so we talk about that a lot, and burnout for healthcare professionals and, social workers and people that work with the public and try to help others. But I read a really good article today, and I put a link in the updated description on YouTube for this video by a wonderful man named Mattieu Ricard. He's French, and he's probably the most famous Western monk, next to let's see, Western monk. I think he's probably the most famous Western monk, and he's actually from my lineage. Tell my only claim to I don't know him at all. And he's a translator, and then he turned into being a guinea pig, where he was wired up with all kinds of measurements on his head and so forth of not an EKG, somebody feed me the word. The different kind of brain waves, and I think they also did brain scans and looked at what areas of his brain were activated when he was meditating. So he gained the moniker "the happiest man alive." And we can't really say he's the happiest man alive because only very few people have ever been tested in this way, but then he went around the world talking about happiness and how you become happy based on universalized Buddhist principles. So Mattieu Ricard wrote a wonderful article about his experience in the lab, where a researcher had been researching empathy for a really long time. And she decided to hook him up as part of her studies. And she'd done many studies. That was her area of expertise, on empathy and maybe compassion fatigue. And, having people conjure up, stuff like, for example, watching somebody get an electric shock. And this comes right out of some terrible we all know that study about subjects who were actually seemed to be tortured, and how people reacted to that, but this is different. And no, not an MRI. I was talking about the brain, like delta waves and so forth, fMRI measures measures the you also see him, fMRI, you just put you in a tube and you go in, right? But he also had all the little things on for measuring not EKG, but the brain waves also. So, I'm glad you read it, Lori. I really love that article. It was just like, the only way I can better it is by organizing a little differently so we can really bring it, because my attention span is short. And I think probably a lot of people's are right now, and kind of get to the essential points. So empathy was like, you watch somebody suffer, and I'm sure somebody wasn't actually being hurt in this study. And somebody's like getting a shock or getting, hurt in some way. And watching this video, the people that watched it, the areas of their brain that were activated by it was as though they were experiencing the suffering. EEG, heart. Thank you so much. That's exactly right. So I think they were doing. I'm going on the images because there's a famous photographs of, you can Google this, Mattieu Ricard with all these like suction cuppy things all over his head. In addition to this is about brain function, and areas of the brain would be fMRI. Yeah, I think. So they experience it as pain, like in yourself. A lot of people did. And you can imagine if you went about your career as a nurse or a doctor like that. And Mattieu Ricard could hardly tolerate this. He was asked to reflect on it. There was an image he had. I'm not going to repeat it because it was awful, of suffering that he'd seen on the news. And they watched his brain for like an hour, where he intensely focused on the suffering of this other person, and he could feel it, and his brain was lighting up like it was happening to him. So this is what they're calling empathy, and empathy is defined in a lot of different ways by different experts. We'd had a lot of discussion about this in nursing school, right? And then he couldn't imagine, how you could go on like that, right? Holding the suffering of others in your own self. And it was very easy for him to see right away that people who are in helping professions would obviously burn out. You couldn't possibly hold on to that all the time. So then he did to his great relief, the scientist asked him to do his usual meditation on compassion. And it starts with that, an image. This is called limitless compassion. And that meditation starts with sort of bearing witness to suffering. But then you don't stick with that one person. You kind of you broaden it out. I think you all have done this kind of meditation before. First, the people, like, you see this, you think of this, like a dog who's suffering or something you naturally feel compassion for. And then you think about all the kind of, you can do it in any way, but all the dogs in the United States who are have had that same kind of suffering. And then out in the world, what is that? All the creatures of this world, and how could they feel? And feel that, what's the word exactly on the compassion one? You wish that they would be free of the suffering. You raise this altruistic wish. It doesn't have anything to do with you and what your needs are, so it's not, transactional. and wish with all your heart that these beings would all be free from suffering. And then you relax into an open, non-conceptual state, and you let it all, that conceptualization, go. So that's one meditation. Inseparable from that is a meditation on love. And love, this limitless love, is not like love for some individual person, the attached kind of love. You start with someone you naturally love, like your mother, for example. If you love your mother or your child, I think would be very easy. I think with monks, they thought about their mothers a lot, and maybe with mothers, think about their child, right? That you love them unconditionally, right? Even if it's hard. And then you extend it to, there's different ways of doing that, but the people, for example, think of people you felt neutral towards. And or animals, so you just didn't have any particular feeling about one way or another, and you extend that love for them. But how is love defined? It's wishing happiness for that person. Nothing in your heart but is there, but wishing for happiness for that person. And then eventually you've included like all essential beings, living beings in the universe, in that love. And when they then went back and looked at there's certain areas, the anterior insula and the cingulate cortex, they're really activated during empathy. But when it moves to compassion, a completely different, like, neural net is used. So isn't that interesting? I won't name them for you because they're scientific, but all the areas that light up when maternal love is experienced, of course. All the feelings of for when you meditate on love or compassion, all these feelings of belonging, the areas associated with belonging and gratification and really positive things lights up. And that sort of thing, you could go on generating forever, living in that space, right? It's inexhaustible. It's not like empathy. You can't stay with that thought. And my feeling about right now, some of people's anxiety is that we can't stay with that thought. Of course, of what's happening. It's unbearable to think about if you have any glimmer of good heart, right? And so I think that's part of the agitation. Tell me if you think I'm right. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a self-interest, but I think there's a fear of having to look at this thing, of having to deal with it. What would I, and this feeling of helplessness also, empathy without being able to do anything, because, I think the nightmare for me would be like some of my friends are in their apartment and they need my help, and they have coronavirus, and I have to make a decision about whether I'm going to go in and help them and get exposed and probably get it, or not. So there's that feeling of all those sort of tormented feelings about it that make us tired and worn out towards the end of the day, if we've at all had time to focus on what's going on in the world. And then this agitation, anxiety feeling. But the good news is, like the family who, from their cars, maintaining proper social distancing, did a wonderful party for their granddaddy out there with flowers and so forth. We're going to transform that by using the traditional meditations on love and compassion. And these are in our Lori, for example. These are obvious.
Just a moment.
Oh,
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
Siri thought I was talking to her. It's never ending, the technical glitches. So, let's do some of that meditation. First, let's just rest and let all the thoughts of the future, what we have to do, what we want, what we don't want, all of the baggage we're carrying with us in our minds right now from the past. Just rest. It'll still be there. We won't forget what we have to do. That's not going to happen. And bring our attention to the out breath. And just breathe normally. And as the air goes out, be aware of the sensation of the air going out. And then the next time when your breath goes out, be aware of that, feel that sensation. Just bring your attention back to it. And when your attention wanders, without the commentary, just bring it back and put it on that place where you feel your breath going out. Have awareness of the breath mixing with the air around you. And you can just let everything go right now. Sometimes when you do that for a while, the there gets to be a feeling like there's just a presence there. It's like the body is almost translucent and a bit boundaryless, but still centered. You're still centered in the I guess your heart. We have there's a common word that entered the vocabulary, mandala or mandala, as they say. And a mandala in Buddhism is actually a picture of you and your world. And your consciousness, your pristine consciousness is represented by actually like a letter of the alphabet or a sound that's is symbolized by a letter. And then it's in your body, which is like a palace. It has a certain shape and symmetry. And then outer are all the beings that make up your world, inside and outside of your body as a palace, or your awareness as a palace. And then going out, you have protective energies farther out. And the whole world is completely pure and translucent and made of light. So this symbolism of being like a being of light, completely pure, unadulterated by concepts, is used as a meditation in Vajrayana Buddhism. Isn't that interesting? So mandalas, my mother was a great spiritualist minister. And I thought she was great anyway. And she, we went to a museum. We went to the Asian Art Museum a long time ago. And she'd been to see the Dalai Lama. She'd been to see a lot of great spiritual teachers, but she didn't know that those pictures of mandalas on the wall of the museum actually represented that it was a cutaway view, that you looked at the top into your world as deity and palace and purity. So some people only teach Sutrayana when they teach Sutrayana. I can't do that. Because you're not supposed to mix things up. If you come from a scholastic tradition, you really need to go step by step. But I'm going to tell you, so that's called in Vajrayana taking the result as the path. Like if you have that pure presence, uncontaminated, no clinging, grasping, so forth, you completely blossom those qualities. That's it's represented as deities in palaces, beings of light in palaces. And instead of waiting until you're working lifetime after lifetime to get there, to that place where you can have that realization, the practice is to go right there and be that deity and really convince yourself, have that dignity or pride of being that wisdom deity. And then the path is said to unfold faster. Naturally, in one lifetime or a few lifetimes, blossoming all those qualities. That's something. So let's do a meditation on love, Champa in Tibetan. which is the wish that all beings may have happiness and its causes. So I'm not going to paint for you the picture of somebody suffering right now because we have that image in our minds already, right? So you pick your own image of suffering, and it and empathy reminds you to do this practice. So you feel that empathy, that feeling in your body and mind of what that person is experiencing. And then but you don't need to stay there and wallow in it. You then switch into love, first for that being, and then expanding it out. Like we could use geography. Like if that person was in New Orleans, everybody in Louisiana, everybody in the South, everybody in the United States and North America, everybody in the world, everybody in the universe, human, non-human, and just make that wish. May you be happy. And sometimes in the metta, in Theravadan Buddhism, they call this metta. Here, I believe it's called Maitri in the Sanskrit tradition, and Champa in the Tibetan tradition. Metta meditation is very famous, for among all the mindfulness practitioners, Vipassana practitioners who are based in the Theravadan point of view. And they focus a lot on self-love because they find you can't really extend your love to other beings if you don't have that love of self. So they'll sometimes do dyads while they're actually saying it to another people. Maybe you'll be happy. And they have various phrases that they say. But here, in the Mahayana, the greater vehicle, we're focused on, really intensely focused on equalizing our concern for all living beings. This is why it's called immeasurable love, not just karuna. Karuna or metta? Metta, compassion or love? Oh, I always mix them up. I spent a long time researching all that last time. It is love. Loving kindness, yeah. Anyway, not karuna, metta. We need to equalize our concern. So let's start with it's difficult to love ourselves right off the bat sometimes. So we can start with someone we love on the outside. Let's do that, and then we're going to do a little zigzag and head to ourselves next, and then expand it out. So let's think of somebody you love, and just with all your heart, wish them happiness. May you be happy. You can say it out loud, or you can say it, or you can mentally feel it. Oh, did we just do compassion? No, we're doing love. Yeah, we're starting with love. How did I think I may be a little bit confused today. No, I'm not drunk. Just a little spacey. Yeah, so start with that person you love and wish them happiness. I have to scratch my nose. I'm sorry. Now, if you can't say it directly to yourself, and if you can, great. Because look at yourself like yourself. You're outside of yourself and you're talking to yourself. May you be happy. Eugene, may you be happy. Or you could use that person you just love and have them imagine them in front of you, looking back at you and saying, may you be happy. Or may you have happiness and the roots of happiness. Then expand out to everybody in your street. May you all have happiness and the roots of happiness. Now to your region. Everybody in your half of your nation. May you have happiness and the roots of happiness. And the world, may you have happiness and the roots of happiness. And then everywhere in the universe where there are living beings, may they all have happiness and the roots of happiness. Now rest in an open state beyond subject and object and the love you're sending. Okay, so first I described how to do meditation on love, and then I didn't do it that way at all. So you can do the other way, the other style, and people you're close to you, people you feel neutral towards, and then people you have maybe you don't like. Okay, yes, traditionally love comes before compassion. So I guess my common sense kicked in. Do you have any questions or comments? I feel better after doing that. I can see why Mattieu Ricard liked it. So his point is that you develop several qualities by doing these exercises. Courage, interestingly, the feeling of affiliation and motherly love, a determination to find a way to help. You radiate kindness and you give off a peaceful calm if you do this meditation regularly. And in that state, you can really be attentive to the other. What happens when you feel the empathy? You feel somebody else's pain, like you're one big raw nerve. Is that you stop wanting to be around them, right? Don't want to see it. You don't want you turn off the news. That might not be a bad idea anyway, but you know what I mean? You're not very effective in that state. And you burn out and turn away. And this meditation on love, which we've just done, the compassion exercise we're about to do, makes you want to go towards or engage. So let's practice on compassion. I think probably everybody's watching this video has done these before. But there's a tendency in the Tibetan tradition for particularly lay people, I'd say, to skip over this part because we like, in our Nundro is the 4 thoughts that turn the mind are an implicit part of our contemplation of bodhicitta. And we're in a hurry. And in our first Nundro in particular, we barrel through and don't really spend time practicing the 4 or 5 main practices associated with building bodhicitta, the building blocks. And one of those is love, and another is compassion. So compassion is the wish that living beings be free from suffering and its causes. And the object of your meditation are those suffering beings. We're back to that. I finally got around to them. You think of what suffering person, and then you arouse your compassion. And the compassion means not feeling more agony. That's not the idea. It's a wish that you'll be free from suffering, starting with an individual and going out to all sentient beings. I received this teaching from Pema Chödrön in person many years ago at a high school. Somebody rented a private high school. They rented in Berkeley, and she came, and it was a beautiful event. And she would couple these. She would say she would merge them into one. So maybe we'll do that at the end. First, we'll do the compassion, and then we'll merge them into one. So what you're thinking is, may you be free of suffering. So start with that hurting person. I've got it, mine, and who really touched me this morning watching the news. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. Now extend it out a little bit to other people. Extend it out further. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. And extend it out to all living beings in the universe. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. And rest. Let the reference point drop. No longer you, the sentient beings, the sending of compassion, but a relaxed and open space. All righty. And then we can go out to combine them. I believe Pema Chodron, the famous teacher of these practices, did combine them. So you would say, may you have love and the roots of love. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. And then start with yourself. And then the people, closest to you, proximally or emotionally. And then out. May you have love and the roots of love. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. May you have love and the roots of love. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. Extending, reaching way out, incorporating many sentient beings. May you have love and the roots of love. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. And all the way out, incorporating everyone without exception. May you have love and the roots of love. May you be free of suffering and the roots of suffering. And then let it all relax. Drop all your reference points. Okay. Good to hear that you feel better too, Heart Sutra, doing these practices. I'd say maybe I've done more with the love practice. I know I have in recent years. Tenzin Palmo, Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo. I had a little interview with her in India, and she recommended for us old Vajrayana practitioners that we go back and focus on metta practice, this loving kindness meditation again. And so I have a little bit of a refreshed experience with that, and I think I need to work with the compassion because I was feeling that hook, that empathetic pain in my heart. Maybe that's not all bad. I'm going to read you something very interesting from the words of my perfect teacher, by Pato Rinpoche. He gets last two chapters, actually maybe all the chapters. He gets to the most interesting part, the very end of the long chapter. So this is just a contemplation point as we say goodbye. The sign of the meditation having on suffering and samsara in the cyclic existence. If sign of that having truly taken root in you is to feel like Geshe Langri Tongpa. One day, one of his close attendants told him, "The others call you Langri Tongpa Gloomy Face." Apparently, he was walking around scowling, frowning all day long, looking very sad. He said, "How could my face be bright and cheery when I think about all the suffering in the three worlds of samsara?" The Geshe replied. It is said that Langri Tongpa only ever smiled once. He saw a mouse trying to move a turquoise that was on his mandala. And there we're talking about the physical representation of a mandala. It's kind of a shrine object. But the mouse could not lift the jewel on its own, so it called tick, 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 tick. And another mouse came along too. One mouse pushed the turquoise while the other pulled. That made Langri Tongpa smile. You can tell it's a Tibetan story. I've never seen Indians. I'm not sure turquoise existed in India, or it wasn't such a big deal. Turquoise is one of the great standard jewels and regarded as a jewel in Tibet. So, I've said before that, the lamas I know and the ones that I've followed have been generally really cheerful guys. And they drop, it's not that they don't have tragedies. They do, but they're sad when the tragedy happens. But in general, unless it's like a big death of one of the key people in their lives, then it might linger, in their physical being. That's what I see. This is my projection, because I do have seen people go through a grieving process, which is good to note. But it's that they aren't dwelling on it all the time. So they're able to drop the thoughts, the obsessive reliving the suffering of the past, hoping for more, all that stuff we talked about a million times. But this Geshe means like Dharma scholar. Sounds like his main practice was really, empathy coupled with compassion. And he was a gloomy faced one, and you'll see very serious scholars tend to be a lot more serious. Not always. You'll meet some real happy scholars, but the lamas I met who were it's partly also the way you're supposed to be very serious when you're teaching on a throne, and the scholars are very traditional generally. Who can you generalize by any group of people? But so there is a very, like, for example, well, I won't use an example because it's my projection, but people, some of the very traditional lamas right out of Tibet will seem very, very serious while they're on the throne. They don't joke around at all. Whereas on a Tarchin or Pache, there were kids climbing all over him, and he was teaching in a more casual way. And so that can be true. So Geshe, whatever his name is an interesting one to reflect on. And why was the one thing that made him happy those mice with that piece of turquoise? Maybe we can talk about that next week. So, sorry I was a little disorganized today. We just had this big dance event happen on the street in front of our house. And then the guys who live here and I are having a Thanksgiving dinner tonight. They're we're all in and out of the kitchen. We're getting a kind, as much as we don't have a huge amount of food around here, but as much as we can pull together, we're going to have a nice meal together. So I hope you find some way to transform your empathy into compassion, and to dance in the street. Whatever, keep going through this really difficult time as we witness what's going on. Okie dokie. I'll see you guys next week on The World's on Fire live stream. Bye.